Happy New Year and welcome everyone to a very virtual CES this year. In an effort to view our current circumstances with a bit of a silver lining approach, I'm appreciative that I won't be walking 30 minutes from the Wynn to the Cosmo only to find out that my meeting got moved to the Bellagio this year. My name's Daniel Cohen. I have the pleasure of running Octagon's media rights consulting practice, and I have an even greater pleasure of working with our very esteemed panelists today. Lisa Baird, who's the commissioner of the National Women's Soccer League, David Proper, who's the EVP of Media and International Strategy at the NHL, and David Denenberg, who's the SVP, Global Media Distribution and Business Affairs lead at the NBA. Welcome, everybody.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Sure. So listen, to set the stage, these are wonky times, right? So I'll run through a couple of quick parameters on where we are with the current space of sports media, and then I'm going to shut up, turn it over to the pros here. But to take a moment and reflect on what is going on in this evolving media space, right? The US OTT market, it's booming. We all know that. 4.5 average subs per SVOD product in an American household right now. We ran some analysis. We saw that CAGR growth on revenues of OTT products are going to grow over 10% per year for the next 5 years. There's over 250 streaming services in the US alone. Sports digital viewership was up over 20% just in the last year. And meanwhile, digital advertising has now flipped, revenues, total revenues have flipped. Digital advertising has now surpassed that of TV linear advertising. 5 million subs were lost on cord cutting alone last year. But with all that said, and with all these things and consumption moving, all these consumers moving all over the place, sports continues to hold its own, right? And that's why we're all here today, and that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the fact that Lisa, the NWSL, had a milestone event last year, the most watched league match ever. David, over at the NBA just a few weeks ago, opening week, you all were able to earn 67% increases. And while the Stanley Cup, like most leagues last year, took a ratings dip, digital viewership and consumption was on fire last year for the NHL. And actually, David Proper, a recent Octagon survey that we actually haven't shared with you or Commissioner Bettman yet, shows that the NHL, above all leagues analyzed in a recent survey we conducted, held the most fan passion and fan loyalty throughout the pandemic. So that's the stage we're talking about. Lots of things going on. I'll tee it up with the first question here. This pandemic, what has it taught you about live sports on television versus live sports on digital platforms? And I'll start with the commissioner.
Well, thanks, David. And boy, it's taught us a lot. And I'd have to say, I came in and right as I came in, Dan and Octagon who were the lead consulting firm, were helping us to really finish off 2 landmark media deals, one with CBS and one with Twitch for our streaming rights. So we were really lucky that we had 2 media partners that were new going into the pandemic. And it was absolutely the right thing to be doing, to do a traditional deal and do a streaming deal at the right time. What we learned, because we did our competition 2 different ways during the pandemic. We did a bubble format with a very new competition, very exciting Olympic style format. And then we followed it up with a full series where we were able to take advantage of some big broadcast windows. And frankly, what we learned was this: TV is still really strong. We posted 500% increases in our TV, not only when we were the first league back in the summer, but also in the fall when we all were on TV and there was a plethora of sports. So I would say that, number one, TV is still incredibly strong, and it is a medium that people are still turning to, particularly for our suckers. But what we learned is, as we developed our streaming audience and as we did the right things to promote to the worldwide women's soccer audience, where we were, what we were doing. We did it with a combination of archive games as well as new games. We had global exclusive games. We really did. We found a global audience that was incredibly engaged. And by the end of our season, we were seeing numbers that would rival a big broadcast window on our partner CBS. So we couldn't have learned better. And I think that our fans are finding us in both places and are equally comfortable finding us on TV as well as digital. So pretty good success for us in a very challenging year.
David Proper at the NHL.
Lisa hit on a number of things. I think anytime you look at what's going on TV, you got to contrast it with what's going on digital. And there's no really way to separate those two. So what we see is sports on TV is still where its primary distribution model is. We're not, when it comes to OTT, you really think more about the scripted programming that's doing really well there. Sports is still a bit of a, particularly live sports, is still a bit of a toe in the water. And until somebody really engages on a full-on exclusive model for a game structure, I don't think we're necessarily going to know how sports performs on a live basis exclusively. What I did see, and what's become somewhat confusing, and one of those things I don't know how we're going to figure this out in the short term, is that we, as you mentioned, had a really good year digitally, and a lot of our digital fan bases makes up either very avid fans or younger fans. Younger fans in particular consume sports differently than our generation. They're used to snippets and as they call it, snackable content, which works really well in digital, doesn't work as well on linear programming. And so what we're trying to figure out, is everybody's trying to figure out, is how to mesh those two up. And the interesting point that Lisa made about internationally, what we're finding in Europe, they're much more amenable to, we have deals where it's exclusively digital and they're doing really well on live programming. But here in the US, there's almost more of an expectation that there's a linear feed and there's a digital feed you can choose, plus there's second screen opportunities on digital. And sometimes the younger generation just wants the second screen opportunities. Finding that balance has been the thing that I would say, not that we've learned, we've just learned we need to figure out how to, and we're still testing those waters to get there.
David Denenberg at the NBA, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything my colleagues here said, but I think the pandemic gave us a lot of interesting opportunities to experiment, not just on the digital front, but on the linear front. And I would, really credit our broadcast partners, both on the national side and the regional side, with going along with a bunch of the experimentation we did in Orlando. For example, there's no fans there, so we had a rail cam. You couldn't do that in a normal arena where there's fans. Created a bunch of different, really interesting camera angles. We were able to put something called a courtside cam, where the players before the game or at timeouts come in and engage directly into the camera with the fans. So, those were interesting technologies that, we wouldn't have a chance to do otherwise, that I think, some of that is going to stick after. We won't be able to do a rail cam when we have fans, but there's other, courtside cam, things like that we'll be able to do moving forward. And then on the digital, it's sort of it gives you so many opportunities. We did from Orlando, and we're continuing to do this year, alternate feeds on our NBA League Pass product. So whether it's a sports betting focused feed, which we think is going to increase engagement for fans and really give them choice moving forward, to influencers. I'm not cool enough to know most of our influencers who are calling games, but my kids know them, which is more important. That's who we're trying to get to watch our games. So it gave us a lot of chances to experiment. Another thing we did was virtual fan boards in Orlando. And we honestly didn't know how it was going to work. It worked out way better than we even could have imagined. I participated once, and you really get into it because we had these, through Microsoft Teams, we had these separate, fans still like to watch with other fans. And so not only would you appear on the video board in the game and you're sitting there trying to find yourself in the game telecast, but you're also interacting with fellow fans, behind the scenes in this Microsoft environment. So that was pretty neat too. We have a few teams. The Warriors are doing what they're calling the Dub Hub. They did a virtual fan board now for this year as well. So it gave us, this whole pandemic gave us a lot of opportunities to experiment, reinvent, how we look at games from both a linear and a digital perspective.
David Proper touched on something really interesting here, and he used that word snackable, and it's something that we look at all the time when evaluating the value of media rights and where eyeballs are headed and where they're going. David Denenberg, the NBA is clearly a leader in trying to create alternate feeds, snackable. I mean, shoot, I could buy for a couple bucks the last few minutes of the fourth quarter of any game I want. We measure that just in the last 2 years alone, smartphone usage daily is up over close to an hour and a half more per day. And if that's where people are going to be watching through internet connected devices, mobile devices, can you share with us a little bit more, leading off of David Proper's comment, about what the NBA is doing to address this snackable content and what trends you've seen throughout the pandemic fans and consumers are moving into?
Yeah, I mean, we've been leaning into social, as you know, for a number of years. I mean, we're the most followed sports league on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube. So we've been at it a long time. I think some of the lifestyle content, still, we have Shaq doing a dance at midcourt is still a very popular clip. And so the things that show the players, personalities has really resonated on our social platforms. But we're seeing incredible engagement. Even this year, our YouTube channel over the first 2 weeks, it was the most viewed weeks in the history of the NBA YouTube channel, which goes back 15 plus years, was these first 2 weeks of the season. Watch time is up, like 250% this year. So we're just seeing a ton of engagement globally across digital. And we program, we have a great social media team that programs the different platforms for, the content of the people that are watching on those platforms. So we're seeing definitely, we're trying to program those specifically for what those people want to see. Obviously, you got the short clips on TikTok, you have some longer form stuff on Facebook and what have you. But, we're very pleased with the digital consumption. We're doing a ton of stuff on our direct to consumer platform through the NBA app. Like I said, whether it's the alternate feeds, we're doing alternate languages. We're doing, like I said before, this, sports betting feeds. We're doing influencer feeds, as I mentioned. So we're trying to use our direct to consumer, platform as a lab, for lack of a better word, to really experiment and see what works. And we don't have it all solved yet. We'll see over the course of the next 12 months or so what's really resonating. But we really are trying to target each specific platform with the content that we the great thing about these platforms is you get instant data, so what works, and then you try to double down on it, and that's what we're focused on right now.
David Proper, because you instigated this part of the conversation, on the trend side, specific to the pandemic, have you seen fan behavior, fandom, consumption shift, change, accelerate in any way with regards to the NHL? And then Lisa, you could jump in too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that there's a couple of interesting points that for us that come off of what David said, because obviously what the NBA does is phenomenal, and we try to stay very abreast of what everybody else is doing. We obviously do a lot of that ourselves in terms of how it affects our fans. And I think that in a very good way, all the leagues work together and kind of figuring out how things work. The fans expect to see us start in October, play in playoffs in April, Stanley Cup final in June. And I am reasonably convinced that obviously when we came back, that was a big deal for every one of the leagues. When they came back, it was a big deal because people wanted normalcy. People wanted the opportunity to see their sport again and so on. But then when we were all kind of running in that same August, September, October window, I think it particularly hurt the sports that aren't used to being there, that the fans are not used to being there. And it sort of reiterated for us how important it is for us to get back onto a normal cycle. And that's really, one of the priorities we're looking at for the 21-22 season is getting back onto a normal cycle. It's why we've tried to set this season, and I suspect the NBA as well, has tried to set this season up the way we have, so that we're in our space that we're really known for. And we always knew that was important from a TV scheduling perspective, but I never realized how much the fans, that's how they orchestrate their lives as well. And the last thing I would add is on the social media side, one of the things that we have found is, and it's not surprising, is that particularly those who engage with us through social, and the younger demographic, they consume a lot based on having almost personal relationships with the players. That's not something I did growing up. I honestly, like when my son asked me about it, I kind of do the guy plays basketball or soccer or hockey well, fine. I don't care what he does in his free time, as long as he doesn't do something that's, you know, particularly offensive to me. I don't really care that he likes this show or likes to wear these clothes. Or that has become absolutely critical to what we did during the pandemic. And it was interesting to watch our players embrace that, because our players are not known for embracing that. Yeah, I mean, the NBA has always had the benefit of their players are very good with that. Our players didn't embrace it as significantly as they did this, because they were more comfortable in the digital space, I believe. And because they knew fans were looking for this at a time when there wasn't hockey being played, they really embraced it. And I thought they did a great job. That's something I can't see us ever going back from. That's become such a critical component of engaging that it's something we never pushed as hard as we did. And now it's absolutely going to become critical to any kind of growth we have.
Fascinating. Lisa?
Yeah, I mean, how did the pandemic change? Well, it's hard for us to even, it changed everything. I think because, and you got to remember, we're only 10 years as a league. I think people forget that. And I think, you know, I go back to the fact that, you know, and I'll talk a little bit about it, women's sports. We're just at a different place in our growth cycle right now. As women's sports, only 4% of all media is against women's sports. It's not even 10%. It's 4% of all sports media is against women's sports. So I don't look at that as.
On top of that, Lisa, only 1% of sponsorship dollars.
And only 1% of sponsorship dollars. I personally am trying to change that as we speak. But the point is, I think what we are, where we are with our fans is we're only 4%, you know, maybe we're less than 4%, obviously, but we have the world's most global stars playing in our game. So there's just what we're benefiting from, and it's happening digital and linear, and it's happening in social, everything, is that we have these stars, and all of a sudden our media distribution caught up with the ability for people to see them and people to engage with them. What I found about our audience, and I'll speak this with media, is that they're young. I mean, first of all, we don't have a legacy older audience. We're 10 years young. And so these are the people that our fans were born in the age of Reddit. In fact, one of our owners founded Reddit, interestingly enough, but we're very digital first fan base anyway. And they're so comfortable going back and forth that they're just used to finding us in social media and then gravitating to whatever distribution fan. So when you look at our engagement numbers, they're the highest of any team. Like, we were constantly engagement wise, but they're small. So as we grow and get bigger, I'm sure that, you know, we'll do it. But the engagement numbers, because they're just rapidly looking for us because it's the first time there. What I will say is that I don't think we can underestimate how much the pandemic as a medical problem impacted sports. And all of us don't speak about that, but the challenges that we had as leadership, keeping players safe, reassuring fans, whether they were in stadium or at home watching it, that what we were doing was safe, reacting in the moment to issues. I think it's changed fundamentally how we're going to approach sports going forward. We were very lucky, and we were very fortunate that we put into place from the start medical protocols that worked. We only had one game rescheduled, and that was due to poor air quality in Portland because of the fires. Who knew? But we were, you know, we were so focused on our player safety because of our players. But what we've now learned is an incredible new capability as media, which is how to be quick and nimble, how to flex, what we're going to need to do. And then more importantly, and it's something I'm interested in both the David's commenting on, is we went into this whole season because we had to with a remote production capability. We did not have the money. We just didn't. So we developed from the outset a remote production capability, and we were really pleased with that. We were thrilled with what we could do with offsite talent and what we could do with our whole form of digital transmission. And we made fundamental changes with big broadcast partners and how we were prepping in games days. That benefits a small league like us that has to be very cognizant of our production expenses. So on the one hand, we learned to be flexible and nimble. On the other hand, we learned to do something remote that gives us more protection and more flexibility in case things happen in the future. So I think we haven't talked about that because it's normal for us to talk about fans and monetization. But I think that I'm certainly, as the commissioner and the lead finance person, going to hold on to a lot of the lessons we learned in the pandemic to build a real world-class digital production capability going forward. And I know my CFO and owners are going to be very happy that if we can do it cost efficiently.
You just touched on the next question, so thanks for teeing up.
All right, so I'm done.
Yeah, you're good, Lisa. Thank you. It's technology, right? It is changing how we consume. It's changing how we produce. Gosh, David Denenberg, if you could talk a little bit about how the pandemic forced you and the NBA into making changes and what those changes really are and which ones do you think are going to stick? To Lisa's point, sounds like the league is really comfortable, and as you can see by the quality of content on CBS and Twitch, Remy Productions here to stay. What other things are you seeing that the NBA is going to do? And David Proper, you could follow right after if you don't mind.
Yeah, just exactly. Lisa's absolutely right. I mean, and the commissioner was really clear from the beginning. Health and safety of our players and coaching staff and all the personnel that put on a game is of paramount importance. So everything we did was through that lens. And starting with Orlando first, that meant a lot more robotic cameras, and we learned, they work pretty well. You don't have to have a man camera in every place, and we had a few, but we had a lot of robotic cameras in Orlando. And remote production, exactly. I mean, that's something that we've done from time to time. We experimented with, but frankly, this year going into the home arenas, we're doing for each regional sports network, we're having the home RSN produce the feed for the away team. The away team is not traveling their personnel. I mean, certainly not their talent. And then they have the ability to control one or two of the cameras and then, insert their own talent and graphics. So for the average fan, you can't tell the difference. But to Lisa's point, it's a cost savings, but most importantly, it all stems from safety, because the less people there, the less chance of transmitting COVID, obviously. And we're doing that with our national telecasters too, on side-by-sides. The ESPN and Turner are doing Remy's, obviously for exclusives, they're going and producing themselves. But I can't say enough about the spirit of collaboration between our national networks and our regional sports network partners, because it's been amazing. And, to put in a plug for women's sports, it's not just on the NBA side. We saw that in the WNBA, we had the Wubble down in Florida as well. And we employed, a similar model. We essentially produced everything. We didn't have a bunch of different telecasters coming in. It looked great. Obviously we successfully concluded the season. So I think I think on the production side, we're definitely going to continue to see innovation there. In terms of other stuff, we experimented with virtual signage. I know David Proper, their league, has been doing that for a long time. We hadn't really done that yet. We experimented that in Orlando. It turned out great, so we extended that to this season. We're rolling that out both with the regional sports network games and some of the national games as well. And it's a new opportunity for revenues for our teams, for our network partners. So we're going to continue to monitor it. We'll see what happens, but it's definitely, the pandemic forced us to be innovative and creative in how we approach the telecasts and the monetization of them.
David Proper, what's going to stay? What do you think is going to stick that you were forced into having to make some technology changes or leveraged technology that'll stick with the NHL?
Okay, so I think what Lisa and David talked about with the single remote production, that worked so much better than we, and by we I probably mean everybody on this call as well as everybody who's involved in it, thought it would. We worked, again, the RSNs, the Nationals, we worked really hard with them. I know that the other leagues did, because we would hear about it and ideas would get shared. And by the time we executed that, it was almost impossible to tell the difference between a regular broadcast. And because of the cost savings, not just to us, but the RSNs and the Nationals, I don't see that going away. Now, there may be games where it goes away. There may be instances, but it's too efficient and was too good for us to turn around and say, okay, let's go back to the old system of everybody travels to every game and produces. But moving beyond that, we had some innovations we tried out. Most of them were innovations that were not necessarily would have to go away if the fans came back. We experimented with a Jitacam that sort of reenacts what it looks like when you're playing the video game, the NHL video game. It sort of lets you watch the game that way. We experimented with additional audio. I would tell you that some of that is likely to stay if we can work out some of the glitches, but our initial looks at a lot of those things where they were very positive. With audio, you obviously have to be sensitive to what players or things like that. The Jitacam does sometimes break into the sight lines of some fans. So there's things we have to work out there. But I think those kinds of technologies, even a rail cam along the top of the glass, are things that we would look at and that we were able to try that we could not have tried on the fly during a season. The last thing, and it's beyond just the pandemic safety side, which we, like everybody else, that was the paramount. But we obviously are all seeing economic effects from the pandemic. So we have, as David mentioned, we have also tried out some new things of ways to generate revenue. Some of them can't stick, like selling advertising on tarps over the stands. I mean, obviously we're not gonna have tarps over the stands when fans come back, but we're trying out a virtual advertising that will be on the ice on the blue lines. That's something that if it works, and we can work out through all the things that need to, not just the technology side, but the varying competing sponsor issues and things of that nature, that's something I could see sticking. Not a technology item, but helmet, putting branding on the helmets, that could stick if it's something that, doesn't offend and generates revenue. And look, I don't personally have any knowledge one way or the other whether it will stick, but the selling of naming rights to our divisions certainly got a lot more play in the press than any of us ever thought it would. And most of those things are the kinds of things that don't happen if we're not in a COVID environment. The things that why take the chance? Why bother? We're all doing fine. We don't need to make that incremental. This year, we're willing to try some things.
Lisa, you tried a bunch of things. You've got some of the best tech companies supporting the NWSL out there. There's not a FANG out there, right? You got Google, you've got Amazon, Twitch.
Yeah.
Can you share with us a little bit about the technology that you leverage through partners to get?
Yeah, I think, having Google come in, we announced them the night of the start of our Challenge Cup, appropriately named for a challenging season. But I think we're the first league to do Google Meets and have virtual fans. And that was something that what I found, what was really interesting about this season, bringing in technology partners like Google and Twitch, is how even without the, hey, let me, figure out the making money off of it, how eager they were to work with one another. So we had an incredible partnership that we enacted within 3 weeks, between a Google Meet, virtual fans in the stadiums, and Procter & Gamble with the secret watch parties. And when you think of it, and I don't know whether it was because of the pandemic or because we were new and first and people were excited to get into it, I really can't say. something like a partnership between Procter and Gamble and Google and a new league in the old days would have taken 6 months to pull off with contracts and rights and this one, that. And I don't know, I don't know if this will last, back to the point that David made about sticking, but the roll up your sleeves, let's make it work, let's be fast and nimble between partners. And I mean, imagine, what Google has to do to go up, what Kate Johnson had to do to go up to get the approvals to do this, or Procter and Gamble, pretty big company, top 50. We brought in 3 top 50 sponsors literally within 4 weeks. How eager and how nimble and how flexible they were working with each other to create technology solutions. That's what was, I hope, sticks, obviously, but that made it exciting. And Twitch and Amazon were with us, David, as you know, from the beginning, and what they enabled us to do internationally with developing those fans and all the things that we needed to do. We'd never done this before, moderating chat rooms, doing it in different languages, literally sprung up overnight, and how we worked with them to safeguard our players. Because we literally went in with live sports. We weren't doing, produced contents. We went in with live sports. It was brand new for us, and how nimble and flexible and careful they were with our game and our players was amazing to me. And I have nothing but great things to say about both Twitch and CBS in trying some things first on. I mean, we even got CBS. I probably should be saying this at CES, but CBS really worked with us because we had, I think, 7 broadcast games, and what they require, understandably, in terms of setup days and, backup transition stuff. They worked with us to make it happen in a cost-effective manner with our Remy capabilities. So to me, that's the hallmark that I hope sticks, is we're becoming a more flexible industry. And I hope that happens. I hope that stays.
All right, in 1 minute or less, because we have to get to the rapid fire round, which is always my favorite. So in 1 minute or less, David Proper, I'll start with you. We're still going through this pandemic. Arguably, we're at the worst time of it. But what's the upside? What are you most excited about heading into the next season? And after David Proper, maybe Lisa, you can share, and then David Denenberg.
Oh, God. I mean, look, the simplest answer is we've all been doing this a long time, and we all do it because we love the sport. We love the industry. We love what we're doing. I'd like to get back to some kind of normalcy. I agree with what Lisa said, and I think, and what David said, but I think what Lisa said is absolutely true. There's been a real flexibility and a real willingness for people to do things we wouldn't do in the past. And that's been great. And that's been interesting. And as much fun as that's been, I want life to go back to normal. And I think just getting some games, getting seasons back, going through a real season for us, and is just going to be, that normalcy is something that hopefully will bring, that's what I'm most excited about.
David Denenberg, oh, sorry, Lisa.
No, David, go next.
I'm most excited about fans coming back to buildings, right? I mean, we've experimented a lot with, we didn't know how it would work, the piped in noise. It's actually worked a lot better than we thought. We even had, in Orlando, we tested different volumes, and, we played, we had the audio, the live audio from whoever the in-arena announcer is for each team. And the players feed off that energy. And so it's nice to have the piped in audio, and it's kind of the next best thing to fans being there, but there's nothing that can replace, as David said, we've been doing this a long time, but we do it because we're fans. And, to be in a building with energy and, an NBA game where, the excitement and the in-arena entertainment that's missing now, those are the things I look forward to getting back, along with whatever sticks from the innovations that we've done. We think it'll be, an even better telecast and in-arena experience once we get back to normalcy.
You know what? I'm a rookie commissioner. I am. And I started my job as a commissioner on March 10th, and I shut the league down on March 12th. And then we were the first league back. And along the way, we had to sign sponsors. We got PPP funds, which we needed. We pay all our players. We're a single entity. We changed cities. it's not that I want normal, because I don't know if normal is coming back, but I just personally am really looking forward to a year where I didn't feel like I had to constantly come up with a solution to a problem that I'd never seen before. And you got to remember, you guys have a lot of more years in your seats than I do. I'd never seen some of these problems before. And I remember spending Saturdays and Sundays myself writing the medical protocols. So I'd like a season, and next week I get to do my first draft. Our preseason starts on a little bit ahead of time, but it starts Feb 1.
Lisa, can you, real quick plug for you, can you let folks know how to tune in to the draft next week?
Yes, we're going to do our draft on Twitch so that it's available and exciting to our global audience, including all our fans in Brazil because of our great players. So tune in next Wednesday night, 7 p.m. on Twitch.
All right, now my favorite part. We're going to make this quick because we're running out of time, but you have no idea what I'm about to ask you guys, which always makes it so much fun, and show a little bit more personality of who you all are. So rapid fire, first thing that comes to your mind. David Denenberg, last thing you watched on Netflix, go.
The Last Dance, of course. What else?
So prepared. Lisa?
The last Undoing. Come on, David, tell the truth. We all watched The Undoing.
Mr. Proper?
Has to be Netflix.
No, any streaming service.
Killing Eve.
Killing Eve. Okay, good one. A hobby you picked up during the pandemic. David Proper, will stay with you.
Zoom calls count? No. Video games. Started playing video games with my kids.
Which one? Which one's your favorite?
He's a big FIFA guy.
Okay, Lisa?
Thank you. I baked homemade bread for the first time.
Ooh, favorite one that came out? Well,
Oh, it was a beautiful loaf of sourdough bread. How about that?
impressive. David Denenberg.
Pickleball, believe it or not. You may ask what that is. It's kind of like paddle tennis, and it's kind of fun.
Awesome. All right, and the last one here for you. Staying on the food topic, favorite thing you've eaten over the pandemic? Sorry, David Denenberg.
So following up on what Lisa said, my daughter is a big bread baker, so her sourdough bread is incredible. I have to say that's the best thing I've tried.
Yeah, I lived with both my two daughters, college-age daughters. So I will say they really changed my diet. I'm eating a lot of salads, a lot of kale, a lot of vegetables, and I'm thankful for it. So thank you, Allison and Caroline.
So our world is all delivery now, right? So my wife joined a fish delivery service that delivers fresh fish. And the favorite thing I ate was she made a blackened cod from fresh fish.
Oh.
That was like unbelievable. So that would be the one.
Well, now that you all have sufficiently made us hungry, we're going to wrap this up. Thank you so much, Commissioner Lisa Baird, David Proper at the NHL, David Denenberg at the NBA. We appreciate it so much, your insights, your dedication to the industry, for putting things back on television so that we have our sports back. Wishing you a very healthy and happy 21. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.